I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo. Good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to everyone listening on Pacifica stations or the internet, wherever you may be. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood. Hey, I got it. I wasn't sure.
And together, Rebecca and I are going to craft an incredible hour of radio for you called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the health and happiness of your friends and family, and the health and happiness of the fireflies, and the mayflies, and the horseflies, and the houseflies, and all 33 species of flycatchers local to the United States and Canada, and all 400 other species of flycatchers found in Mexico and South America.
Well, buggers are everywhere. Might be one sneaking up behind you.
And pretty much everybody, everything else. Because, like it or not, we're all wrapped up together on this fantastically improbable planet called Earth.
You make us sound like a burrito.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of are.
Yeah, there you go.
We got the ozone layer in the shell. It'd be a little scary to think about what would eat us, yeah. But we've got a typically fantastic show for you today. We're just gonna chat for the next 10 minutes or so, and even though this is a recorded episode, you can join the conversation by sending an email to joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org or a text to 419-973-5841. And we'll make sure your contribution gets read on the air. After that, we'll have a great interview with our good friend, Dr. Mark Jacobson from Stanford University. He's going to tell us why the whole idea of carbon capture and storage is actually a scam that results in even more carbon getting into the air. And then after that, we'll hear from our brilliant and beautiful patrons, without whom we could not be doing this show. And then it's Rebecca's turn on the mic. Rebecca, what will you have for us this week?
I'm going to talk about white mulberries.
We've got both white and regular, I suppose, right, around here in Bowling Green.
Yeah, and actually, it's there's white ones, black ones, I think red ones.
I'm not sure I've seen red, but they probably exist.
Yeah.
That's something I look forward to every summer, despite the hot days, is going around eating mulberries and sometimes feeding ripe, not underripe, mulberries to my dog.
There we go.
She actually knows all the mulberry spots around the town.
Well, if you're really desperate for entertainment and you want to see your dog acting funny, I guess that's good.
Well, we'll look forward to your report, and then it'll be ecological news from around the world, and that's our show. We're recording this episode on July 2nd in the middle of the current heat wave here in Northwest Ohio. Early this morning, about 6 a.m., the outside temperature was a pretty comfortable 75 degrees. We live in an old house, a century home, actually, although it lacks the proper certificate. It's got no insulation, so all that hot air fills up in the attic and makes it basically unbearable on days like this. But we've got some tricks to help out our AC unit not overwork itself and create an ice dam. I don't know if that's a
That happened
problem
to
for
us
you.
this
Yeah.
week. Yeah, we had to go at it with a blow dryer.
Oh, we haven't thought of that. We could try that out. We put fans in our attic blowing out, and we've got fans on the first floor blowing in. The plan is to get all the hot air in the house out before the sun rises, and then we close it all up. And that lets us run the air conditioning as little as possible. Our municipal utility grid in Bowling Green has asked everyone to use as little electricity as they can. The grid operator in this region, PJM, has said that this will be a period of record high electricity usage. And there is actually some threat that the grid could fail. That's a new occurrence in my memory of Northwest Ohio. We don't typically associate instability with flat farmlands, but it's important not to let yourself be guilted out of comfort. Worldwide, household energy consumption took 27% of the total energy produced in 2025, and your personal air conditioner is the barest fraction of that. Unless
However,
you live in a mansion, of
if
course.
you are one of those people who has to have it for some reason like 10 degrees colder in the winter, in the summer than the winter, shame on you, just on general principles for being illogical.
Yeah, you can definitely go too far. But when you hear about these energy warnings by utility companies, remember that comes from their self-interests and not yours.
Yep.
But the story is actually very different in places like California and parts of Texas. In those states, electricity demand from the grid actually drops during the hottest part of the sunniest days. And the reason is rooftop solar. If you have a lot of solar panels on your house, on hot sunny summer days, you actually put more power into the grid than you take off of it. What's happening in places like California is that the solar production from rooftop solar is so high that during the middle of the day, it produces more than 100% of the state's electricity needs. Increasingly, that overproduction is being paired with massive batteries so that even after the sun goes down, the solar power is still being fed back into the grid. Our guest in a little while, Dr. Mark Jacobson, daily keeps track of what's happening to the California grid. As of July 1st, for 89 of the previous 90 days, wind, water, and solar provided more than 100% of all the electricity needed in California for an average of about 5.5 hours each day. So far this year, wind, water, and solar have supplied about 59% of all of California's electricity demand. Gas burning for electricity has dropped from 2023, and for the last 3 days, gas supplied less than 4% of the demand. Similar increases in solar and declines in gas and other fossil fuels are happening in Texas and many other places around the world where solar power, and specifically home-owned rooftop solar, is encouraged. In those places where solar power is providing more power than is actually needed during the hardest part of the day, you can crank your air conditioning up to the maximum without adding any more carbon to the atmosphere. And that's the real point we're trying to make here. That green future that we envision is even more comfortable than our present. This weekend includes the 4th of July, Independence Day for the United States. Yet when things like this heat wave come along, it reminds us that we're actually all interdependent upon each other and upon this great big globe that we all live on. We got a reminder this past week about just how interconnected everything on Earth actually is. Some of you may have noticed a little difficulty breathing. Part of it might have been because we were actually enveloped in a cloud of dust from the Sahara Desert. That's hard to believe, but yes, dust blew all the way across the Atlantic Ocean into the Gulf of Mexico and then was carried all the way northward to Ohio and Michigan. And actually the sunsets on Tuesday and Wednesday were very hazy and looked like a scene from a Dune movie. The same way that dust from the Sahara Desert is carried around the world, the CO2 that we're putting into the atmosphere here in Ohio is affecting the entire world. And as we've said before many, many times, the Earth is stuck in a what, Rebecca?
A Positive feedback loop.
Wow, that's right. A positive feedback loop. Humans are definitely part of that positive feedback because in situations like this, where we have record heat, record electricity demand means that we put even more CO2 into the atmosphere in places like Ohio, which have practically outlawed wind and solar power, forcing us to rely on coal and natural gas. So the loop is global warming causes record high temperatures. The high temperatures cause us to burn more coal and natural gas for energy. That puts more CO2 into the atmosphere, which causes more global warming. But we can break this loop. It's going to take everyone's effort on a societal level and a full commitment to ending CO2 production. The most common known example of a positive feedback loop is when a microphone is caught in a loop with its speakers. The speakers amplify the sound being picked up by the microphone picks up the sound being produced by the speakers, and that's sent off to the speakers again, etc. The result is an ear-splitting screech as the sound loop accelerates to the maximum, where it will stay until either the loop is broken or the speakers tear themselves apart. Oftentimes, if someone is at a microphone that's getting caught in a feedback loop, they'll try to stop the screeching by covering the mic with their hands. And that will work if they're able to completely cover the mic, that is, stop the input completely. If there's a gap between their fingers, the sound will continue to amplify and the screeching will not stop. And that is analogous to the situation on the Earth right now. Real efforts are being made in many countries and many sectors to reduce the CO2 levels. China, for example, actually had a decline in CO2 emissions in its power sector in 2025. That's the first time that has happened since 2015. However, that drop was almost exactly matched by an increase in CO2 emissions in the United States.
Maybe it's a we're going to party till the cops come situation. I don't know.
If only there were cops in this
Yeah,
situation.
really.
Across the entire country, China's emissions did increase by 48.8 million tons, or about 0.28% when you look at all the sectors, like transportation and manufacturing. China, of course, is the world's largest CO2 emitter. Hopefully that doesn't make them the cops. They put about twice as much CO2 into the atmosphere as the U.S. U.S. overall emissions increased by a very similar percentage, 0.23%. That's only about a third of China's. So even though we're trying to cover the mic, so to speak, there's still plenty of gaps between our fingers that is allowing the positive feedback loop to continue. But
Problem.
take heart. While global CO2 emissions are still increasing, we have definitely flattened the curve. When we started this show 7 years ago, every year our CO2 emissions were increasing by several percent. And this past year, they only increased by a fraction of a percent.
Cool.
Ironically, fossil fuel production, that is the mining, refining, and transporting fossil fuels, that was the sector with the largest increase in emissions, increasing by more than 1.5%. Global power emissions, that is the emissions connected with generating electricity, actually fell by 0.13% in 2025. And yeah, it is, of course, it's typical that the biggest problem is also the biggest profiteer. Our guest, Dr. Mark Jacobson, has frequently pointed out that a full 40% of our emissions are actually tied to the fossil fuel industry. That is, once we stop using fossil fuels and switch to a fully renewable energy system, we'll actually just need 40% less energy overall, since 40% of the fossil fuel energy we pull out of the ground is burned just in order to mine, refine, and deliver that same fossil fuel. So, on this Thursday, July 2nd, the sun has risen, we've closed all the doors and windows, drawn the curtains, and started the air conditioning. But since our home has 6 kilowatts of solar panels, now that the sun is hitting them, we're not actually drawing power off the grid. As the sun gets higher and as our panel output increases, we'll actually be providing power to our neighbors.
I should point out it's not too bad in here. Yeah. I'm doing all right, and I don't deal well with heat, so
That's our air conditioning unit. But
I even got the dog to play zoomies for a minute.
our neighbors in Europe are having a much more severe heat wave than we are here in Northwest Ohio. Thousands have died so far this year. The media coverage of the crisis in the United States is focused on the fact that Europeans don't have nearly as much air conditioning as we do here in the US.
Yeah.
The implication is that all they need to do is have more air conditioning, and then global warming won't be a problem. And that's ridiculous.
I feel like there's a weakness to that strategy. After a while, it will work up to a point, and then it will suddenly stop working.
Yeah, it's very see no evil of them to gloss over the real causes and problems that would go against the narratives that the billionaires have paid for. But air conditioning requires energy. You might have known. The more air conditioning we use, the greater our CO2 emissions. Remember, emissions anywhere affect everyone everywhere. Many buildings in Europe simply aren't designed to accommodate air conditioning. This past week, Germany had 3 record days of heat in a row, culminating in 108 Fahrenheit on Wednesday. Roads are buckling, train tracks are warping, and both Poland and the Czech Republic also had record heat. This is not a problem that we're going to solve just by adding more air conditioning. But we are going to solve that problem by entering the green future.
Yes, sirree, bobbers.
We're going to switch to renewable energy sources exclusively, and this has to happen. And it is happening, but not quite fast enough yet. Of course, whenever you have a problem, there will be charlatans offering false solutions for a price. Global warming is certainly no exception. That's one of the reasons that nuclear power is being pushed so vigorously. The ironic thing is that in Europe right now, nuclear power plants in both France and Switzerland are failing. It's simply too hot for them. 3 nuclear plants in France and 2 more in Switzerland have been forced to shut down because the rivers that they use for cooling water were too hot to cool the plants.
Oh, man.
And so that clearly makes nuclear a false solution in a globally warming world. Another false solution is carbon capture and storage. While the fossil fuel industry and much of the mainstream media and many politicians are pushing carbon capture storage, CCS, it turns out that all of these schemes actually result in more carbon being put into the air. And few people have advocated for making the switch to effective means of change more earnestly and consistently than our next guest, Dr. Mark Jacobson. His books, No Miracles Needed and Still No Miracles Needed, lay out a rapid and practical path to a carbon-free survival future. We invited him to do a deeper dive into carbon capture and storage. Let's go to that intro.
Hello, and welcome back to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and who you're with?
Yeah, I'm Mark Jacobson, Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Stanford University.
Thanks for coming back on the show, Mark. You recently did a post over there on X. That's kind of what prompted this interview, talking about CCS and DAC. Could you just remind us what those mean?
Well, CCS is carbon capture and storage, or sometimes it's called CCU, carbon capture and use, and DAC is direct air capture. In both cases, they're trying to get carbon dioxide. In the first case, it's extracting carbon dioxide out of the exhaust stream of, let's say, a power plant, a point source. And the second is trying to extract carbon dioxide directly from the air. And in both cases, the carbon dioxide has to be piped somewhere. And ideally, it's piped underground to a storage facility. But 82% of the plants in the world, they used that extra CO2, that extracted CO2 for what's called enhanced oil recovery, to dig more oil out of the ground. A third application is if you use that CO2 for industry to produce fuels, for example, to replace gasoline or diesel. So all of these are problematic.
In the video that you made, you actually called both of them insanely useless. That's pretty strong language. Could you tell us why they're insanely useless?
Yeah, well, because I mean, this is, by the way, there's what's called natural direct air capture, which is basically growing trees, and that is okay. That's fine.
Mhm.
Um, because trees will extract carbon dioxide out of the air by themselves without human intervention. But direct air capture and carbon capture both require equipment, energy, and pipelines. And it's really the energy and the pipelines that are the main problem here because the energy requirement is enormous. Just to give you an idea, with carbon capture, if you add carbon capture to a coal plant, and you use coal to run the carbon capture equipment, you'll need 25% of the coal electricity output to run the carbon capture equipment. And so you'll need 25% more coal and 25% more coal mining. There's 25% more emissions of coal combustion emissions, 25% more pollution as a result, because carbon capture equipment does not reduce any other chemical aside from CO2. So all the other pollutants keep going, plus you have more of them because you need more energy. And just to give you an idea how really bad this is, in the United States, there was only one coal plant with carbon capture ever added to it. And in that case, they didn't use coal to run the power carbon capture equipment. They actually built a fossil gas electricity generating plant next to
Huh.
the coal plant just to power the carbon capture equipment. So they needed to then mine gas, pipe it, burn the gas. There's no carbon capture equipment on the gas plant, and then use that electricity to run the carbon capture equipment for the coal plant. And then the carbon that was captured, and only about on average over 3 years, 55 to 60% of the carbon dioxide from the coal plant that they put capture equipment on was captured. But that all that captured carbon, almost all of it, 90% of it was offset by all the emissions from the gas plant and the emissions from the coal mining as well. And then what did they do with that carbon that was captured? They piped it to a nearby oil field to dig more oil out of the ground. And that process releases between 50 and 120% of the CO2 that's captured right back to the air. Enhanced oil recovery, that is, because enhanced oil recovery, 30 to 40% of the CO2 that's captured is released during the enhanced oil recovery process. And another 20 to 80% is emitted due to the additional oil that comes out of the ground. Because every ton of CO2 added to an oil field, you get 2 more barrels of oil. And depending on whether that oil replaces previous oil or is new oil, that's why it's a big range, 20 to 80%. If in the latter case, you're going to get like 80% more CO2, in the former case, maybe 20%. So overall, you hardly get any CO2 captured just from the process because of the energy requirement. But then once you account for the oil recovery, you just have enormous additional CO2. And that's and direct air capture, by the way, uses a lot more energy than carbon capture because with carbon capture, at least the exhaust stream has high concentrations of CO2, whereas with direct air capture, when you're taking CO2 out of the air, the CO2 in the air, there's about 430 parts per million. It's very dilute. And so it takes even more energy to get CO2 out of the air. But I want to point out, though, that really what we're comparing is not so much what's the absolute amount of CO2 captured with carbon capture or direct air capture. It's relative to what we could capture with using the same money or energy for renewables. So let's say we run, because people argue, well, we don't need to use coal or gas to run carbon capture equipment. Let's use wind or solar because that's clean.
Okay.
Okay, so this is where it becomes obvious how bad carbon capture is, because there's not an infinite amount of wind farms or solar panels installed in the world to run capture equipment. I mean, there's not an excess. It's all of it's being used right now and it replaces fossil fuels or bioenergy fuels. And so if you build a new wind farm, let's say, you're going to use that primarily to displace fossil fuels. And we know that in California, that's what's happening. More solar, in this case, solar in California mostly, is being built. And that's reducing gas on the grid in California, 60%, 61% lower gas in the last 3 years due to the huge growth of solar and batteries in California.
So
So
let's just pause on that for a second, because so switching to the wind and the solar has reduced the carbon going into the air by 61%.
yeah, in California, by going to clean renewable energy, we've reduced in California's main grid, which California is the fourth largest economy in the world, and its main grid is running now on average about 58% wind, water, solar in 2026. And that growth of that wind, water, solar is huge in the last 3 years. And that growth of the solar in particular and batteries has displaced 60% of the gas on the grid. And there's also some imports that have included in that mix that have grown, but the imports are about 57, 58% wind, water, solar as well. And so gas has gone down 61% in 2026 versus the same period in 2023, about half the year so far. And it's due to because gas is used primarily, well, during the day in California, solar is here during the day and then disappears at night. But then batteries now store a lot of that extra solar because during the day we have over 100% renewables powering the grid on almost 86% of the days this year so far. And during the day, when we have extra solar and wind above the demand, that's used to power batteries or to fill batteries. The battery electricity then discharges at night when the sun goes down. And it used to be that gas would then provide the electricity when the sun went down. Now batteries are displacing gas and throughout the night. It's not just, right the hours, it's all night, but mostly like in the first 4 or 5 hours after sunset. And we're down 61%. So point is, with relation to carbon capture, every bit of solar and wind that we build today will displace gas or coal, depending on, there's no coal in California, but other states is coal, biomass, some oil is burned for electricity, but it's not only electricity, it's other sectors as well. And when you replace coal or gas or oil or biomass with renewables, you eliminate not only the CO2 emissions, but you eliminate the air pollution, you eliminate the mining of the fuel or the case of biomass and the cultivation of the biomass. Um, and you eliminate the pipelines of CO2 needed. You don't need carbon dioxide pipelines. Uh, and you eliminate the equipment. So you reduce the cost because you don't have equipment costs, you don't have pipeline costs, you don't have energy costs for carbon capture. You reduce the health problems because you're reducing air pollution. You reduce the climate problems because you're reducing more CO2. You reduce more CO2 with wind or solar replacing a fossil source than you do running capture equipment. Because so if you take the same let's say you need a certain amount of wind energy to run carbon capture equipment. If you use that exact same amount of wind energy instead to replace a coal or gas plant, you reduce a lot more CO2 than you do using that wind or solar to running the carbon capture equipment. So as a result, by using wind or solar to run carbon capture or direct air capture is even worse, you increase CO2. Okay. You're only increasing CO2 because it's an opportunity cost. You can no longer use that wind or solar to displace fossil fuels. And so using renewables to power carbon capture increases carbon dioxide, no matter what the application is. If it's cement, if you're adding carbon capture to cement, if you're adding it to, a coal plant, a gas plant, a biomass plant, you're always increasing CO2 by using renewables to power that carbon capture equipment or direct air capture equipment. And so this is the main problem with carbon capture and direct air capture. It never actually reduces carbon dioxide, and it always increases carbon dioxide. But on top of that, it increases air pollution because you can no longer use the renewables to reduce air pollution by getting rid of gas plants or coal plants. It increases carbon capture, direct air capture, increases pipelines, it increases energy costs, it increases health costs, climate costs, total social costs. It's just no benefit whatsoever. It's like a total scam all the way around. And that's even before you get to what you do with the CO2. That's just getting the CO2 out of the air it only increases CO2 because it just, so the best way, the bottom line is the best way to get CO2 out of the air is to stop emitting it. If you stop emitting 1 ton of CO2, that's the exact same thing as taking 1 ton of CO2 out of the air. But when you stop emitting 1 ton of CO2, you're also not emitting air pollutants. You're not mining the fuel that produced the CO2. You're not creating health costs. You're not creating climate costs. You're not creating additional energy costs. I mean,
Right.
but,
So really, it's a case of an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure there.
yeah, but and it's the whole thing is worse when you look back at that coal plant I told you about, in the only coal plant in the US with carbon capture added. I mean, just to give you an idea, that was in Thompson, Texas. It cost $1 billion for the carbon capture equipment, to build the gas plant, to run the carbon capture equipment, to build the pipeline system. Who pays that $1 billion? It's passed on to customers ultimately, and who pays the highest fraction of their income for electricity? It's low income ratepayers. So basically, carbon capture and same with direct air capture are just a tax on low income people, and it's really a horrible thing because all it does then it keeps the fossil fuel industry in business. It was designed for that purpose. There are actually 4 technologies that are all centered around this carbon capture and direct air capture that are pushed by the fossil fuel industry. There's carbon capture itself, direct air capture itself, blue hydrogen, which is just hydrogen production from fossil gas with carbon capture added. And in that case, you actually need 2 sets of carbon capture equipment to get to both sources of CO2
Mm.
from blue hydrogen or from hydrogen. And then there's electrofuels. So electrofuels are those magical fuels that are proposed to replace gasoline and diesel. And what they are, let's say, because gasoline and diesel, they're hydrocarbons. So you need hydrogen and carbon. So you combine CO2 that's from carbon capture with hydrogen from blue hydrogen usually. And
Right.
so you have all this carbon capture going on in here, and then you combine them chemically to form these hydrocarbons that can replace gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, etc. But from the get-go, and people claim, oh, this will reduce our reliance on carbon. But before you even get to all the components of the system are from increasing CO2. Okay, so you can imagine when you actually put them together, and then you need more energy to put them together, and
Mm.
lots more chemicals as well. And so it's just like they try to make it so complicated. It's like a Rube Goldberg kind of confusing situation. But it's really simple. It's everything, every step of the way, you're actually increasing CO2 when you create these electrofuels to replace fossil fuels. And when you still burn them and you still create air pollution, you still have CO2 emissions when you burn them. If in the case of aircraft, you still have contrails forming. So it's just the whole thing is a scam designed to, I mean, all 4 of these technologies are scams designed to prolong the life of the fossil fuel industry.
Mm. Well, there certainly seem to be a lot of politicians and industry people that are enamored of this. I mean, Biden famously was quite a pusher of carbon capture and storage. You might be interested in knowing that in Ohio, we have laws on the books that we're about to outlaw wind and solar development, basically, because it says they're not don't have a high enough energy capacity factor, as if that makes a difference. But they're at the same time they're also promoting laws that would prevent local communities from stopping carbon pipelines from being built through their lands. So it's kind of so here we're kind of racing backwards. But you mentioned in one of your posts about how the peer-reviewed studies, basically none of them show that carbon capture is practical.
Yeah, famously, there's not a single paper in the world anywhere that shows that carbon capture or capture actually reduces carbon dioxide when the whole system and the opportunity costs are considered. There's not a paper. There's no paper that shows there's any benefit. So it is interesting how people rely on it based on the fact that there's no paper. But there are papers showing the opposite, which is that when you consider the whole system and opportunity costs, carbon capture and direct air capture both increase carbon dioxide, air pollution, fossil mining, pipelines, fossil infrastructure, energy costs, health costs, social costs. And part of the reason is that, in the past, papers have only focused on the point of capture and looked at, well, what happens at the point of capture? Sure, you take CO2 out of the air, but around it, you have CO2 going back into the air if you look at the whole system. So it's like having a myopic, like narrow focus on just the point of capture. Yeah, sure, you're going to get some CO2 reduced. But it's also, even when you look there, there's less CO2 actually coming out of the air than people who love carbon capture estimate, because studies where they're from the fossil fuel back studies, they'll say, well, we're capturing 85 or 90 to 95% of the CO2 at the point of capture. But in reality, when you actually look at real carbon capture plants, as many studies have done, the range is really 10 to 80% capture rates in the annual average, because you're not running at under perfect situations anytime. And so there's really less efficiency as well in the capture than as advertised. But regardless, it's the opportunity cost that's really the main key here. It's like we have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of solar and wind that can be installed at a given time. And when you use that for something else, you're basically creating a new energy demand with carbon capture, just like Bitcoin mining or data centers. You're creating new demand. And when you supply that demand with renewables, you can no longer use those renewables to replace fossil sources. And so you're basically increasing CO2 as a result.
Right. Well, and you argue in your most recent book there, Still No Miracles Needed, that it is very practical for us, and it's within our grasp to actually replace the current fossil with wind, water, and sun. How's the book doing, and how can people get a copy of that?
So we can solve the climate problem and pollution problems. I mean, just to put in perspective, there are about 7.5 million people die from air pollution every year. It's the second leading cause of death worldwide. And global warming is a rising problem. They're both enormous problems, but the sources of both air pollutants and greenhouse gases are primarily the same. They're combustion for energy. That's about 90% of air pollution deaths are from energy, and about 75 to 80% of greenhouse gas emissions and particle emissions that affect climate are from energy. And so we can address that by stopping emissions, by electrifying everything, providing the electricity from clean renewable sources. That's across all energy sectors. So that solves this whole problem. And it's totally feasible because we have 95 to 97% of the technologies already that we need to do this. So it's really a question of deploy on a large scale. So Still No Miracles Needed is a book that just came out in 2026, and it can be found it's from Cambridge University Press. It can be found in Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or from the Cambridge University Press website. But it really is a culmination of my work on air pollution, climate, and solutions to these problems over the last 40 years. But I really believe that by deploying on a large scale, as I said, we're renewables on a large scale, we are eliminating CO2 from the air because we're preventing it from coming in. And CO2 will come out over time. It has a lifetime on the order of 90 years or so. So if we eliminated 80% emissions by 2030, which is coming up quickly, and 100% by 2035 to 2050, we could get down to 350 parts per million due to natural reduction of CO2 from the air by 2100. But the thing is, it doesn't matter how much we want to take CO2 out of the air with carbon capture, direct air capture, it doesn't work. So you can't just want something and make it work just by deploying it and saying, oh, the technology is going to get better. Problem is that technology can't get better because, it can get a little bit better, but it's still going to increase CO2. And it's still going to increase air pollution. It's not designed to reduce air pollution. So it doesn't matter how good you make carbon capture, it's not designed to reduce air pollution. So that air pollution is going to increase because you're using energy, even if renewable, that will prevent that renewable energy from getting rid of fossils. Therefore, we will have more air pollution as a result. So when you have some technology that's not even designed to do something, just making it better doesn't suddenly make it do something like reduce air pollution. And the energy requirement is so large, you can improve it by a lot. In the case of direct air capture, you can improve it by a factor of 3 or 4 or 5, and you'll still increase CO2. It's just so inefficient. I mean, so it's always better to stop emissions than trying to take CO2 out of the air.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Any last words, real quick?
No, I'll just repeat that. I mean, this all applies to what I call synthetic technologies as opposed to, trees. Another, natural direct air capture, like growing trees, but also reducing deforestation. That's a good thing too. So I'm not trying to confuse the two of those. Focusing here on what we call synthetic direct air capture, but also carbon capture.
Okay, so trees, good. Great big fans, not so good.
Yeah.
That was our interview with Dr. Mark Jacobson. If you have any comments about that, or about the lack of miracles needed to change the world, or carbon capture and storage, or anything else, you can give us a text at 419-973-5841. Give us an email at joe@joedemare4greenfuture.org, or find us on social media. And now it's time for us to thank our patrons. Our patrons are wonderful, insightful people, compassionate, intelligent. That's the kind of person that other people would like to be like. It's pretty easy to become a patron. All they did was go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page. They found a membership level that worked for them, that matched their budget, and they signed up. And now a little bit comes out of their account each month and comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. So thank you to our patrons. Now, Rebecca, it's time for your segment on the white mulberry.
It is indeed. Yeah. I'm calling this The Paler the Berry because I know I've already talked about mulberries and mentioned what white mulberries, a variant, so there may be a repetition here. Well, a fair amount of repetition here, but apparently I need a review because I believe I mentioned last week that my dog is eating raw mulberries a lot. Yeah. Well, okay, I noticed something. She also, I based this on the fact that there were a bunch of like white, unripe looking mulberries in my backyard and she was eating them. But I noticed she also, when we go different places, which is it's hot, so I'm only taking her in the backyard so I don't, pass out on a street corner. So, but yeah, when we go other places, she will just eat huge amounts of ripe looking mulberries. So I was like,
right,
okay, what's going on here? So, and then it occurred to me, oh, there are white mulberries.
So she's,
although not all of them are white, which is maybe why I didn't think of that. But so like I reached up and I kept wondering why I never catch that mulberry when the berries are ripe. What's going on there? So like
white mulberry the whole time.
And now the thing is, I don't know if normal people know how to eat mulberries.
There's a method?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't know if normal people eat mulberries off of trees when they're walking down the sidewalk like me, and I don't know if they know how to eat them because their farm kid parents taught them.
Well, surely we're the most normal individuals listening, so we eat mulberries. Everybody must eat mulberries.
Totally. But yeah, for those of you who know, like I reached up and I kind of felt the white berries, and I noticed they were not hard like unripe berries. They seemed kind of soft. And also, like the ones that were softer were more kind of ecru colored. like instead of like greenish white. So I kind of rotated them a little bit and it fell off right in my hand like a ripe mulberry does. I don't see, that's what you do with mulberry besides checking for bugs and bird poop. You also kind of you see if it's, because even some of the darker ones aren't optimally ripe, so you kind of just touch them gently, and if they fall off in your hand, then definitely eat them. So I did this, and
I concur. As an expert,
yes,
I do concur.
There we go. And it indeed tasted ripe. So I was like, oh, okay. So Becca learned something new, or sort of dimly remembered something new. But yeah, white mulberries are called Morus alba. They're a fast-growing deciduous tree. They're native to China, which is interesting because most I believe the red and black kinds are actually native to North America, but these are not. They're the ones traditionally used in silkworm cultivation.
Oh,
They can be invasive because they're spread by birds who run around and poop on your car and sometimes over dirt and spread the seeds. So they're very good at doing it that way, and they're considered invasive in the U.S. by many people. Also, they're valued for landscaping for their landscaping cultivars. So people are working at cross purposes here, basically.
yeah.
Some people are planting them. Some people are trying to discourage them. But yeah, they ripen from white to white, red, or black. So that makes it very difficult to tell from the berries what kind of mulberry it is. And yeah, they have orange, brown, dark vertical cracks that form as they age. And also, the berries can be white, pink, purple, or black when ripe. So that's not going to help you at all. The way to tell is in fact to touch their leaves, because the white ones have smooth leaves instead of fuzzy leaves.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So things may or may not be white on a white mulberry tree. Often not. So yeah, also the berries are in fact reckoned by most people to be sweeter than darker berries, contrary to the saying. The darker the berry, the sweeter the juice. However, they're not as tart. So some people don't like them because they're not as tart, which kind of like brings out the sweetness. It makes it feel sweeter if it's not, I feel like.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like white mulberries less for that reason. Yeah, I also find them a little more mushy.
Yeah.
Which I don't like the texture of them as much.
Yeah. So yeah, more sweet is not always optimal. So yeah, the black ones are fuzzy, the red ones are fuzzy. They have small yellow-green flowers in drooping catkins in the spring, and they spread aggressively and crowd out native plants, reducing diversity, including, I think, the native red raspberry. That's probably why you're not seeing very many. Mulberry, sorry. I'm very confused today. I'm not getting enough oxygen, but yeah. Okay.
That's the Sahara desert dust.
Yeah,
for sure.
it's too much Sahara. We'll blame it on that. We'll say it's that. It's got to be at least partly that. But yeah, so probably the reason you are not seeing a whole heck of a lot of red mulberries is that the white mulberries have in fact pushed them out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That also, we lost a few mulberries in our yard. We've had a couple over the years, and they've all been destroyed for several reasons. I wonder if that is a factor, that the white mulberry
Probably
took their
so.
spot.
There's a lot of mulberry. Some of them I don't know in my neighborhood what they are, because they grow up along fence lines through the chain link fences.
Yes.
As a working
In
class neighborhood.
corners, yeah.
My neighborhood has a lot of. And I'm pretty sure, okay, I thought they were oak leaves initially, but I think those dogs, like, she has a attraction to certain lobed leaf shrubs that grow up, and I think those are actually mulberries. I think she really has
She
a thing
just
for
checks.
mulberries.
She just checks them.
Mind you, this is a dog that does not eat any other fruits or vegetables. We've tried. Like, I gave my old dog carrots all the time. He loved them, but she is just a mulberry girl, and that's it. But yeah, so the leaves, twigs, and fruit are used in traditional Chinese medicine, and they're pretty hardy. They like part to full-time sun. They're not too picky about soil either. They like it if it's alkaline, poor, dry, and disturbed. It loves a little moisture, though. Optimal would be full sun and a little moisture. So, and they tolerate road salt well. So, hardy little buggers they are. They get to be about 20 to 50 feet tall, fast grower, and they feed. It transplants well too. So, if you want to dig it up and put it someplace else, that'll probably work out for you. And also they feed birds and small mammals, so that's a good thing about them. Overall, though, I would not plant them. They're I'd go ahead and get some native ones. Right.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Welcome.
And now it's time for ecological news. Our first story is right here in the state of Ohio. Warning, it's not good news. Governor Mike DeWine has signed into law State Bill 219. This is a bill which allows for oil and gas drilling in our state parks. It also does 100 other terrible things. For example, according to the nonprofit Save Our Parks, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources will not be able to fine or penalize any oil or gas drilling company that spills or has an explosion or leakage or breaks any state law, because the law doesn't allow the state to charge the oil company for anything outside of the royalties specified in the drilling contract. State Bill 219 also says that if any lawsuit is brought against any fracking company that's destroying the state parks, frackers will not have to pay any fines or penalties or change their practices in any way until, quote, a final and non-appealable court order has been issued. Since any court order can theoretically be appealed all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, it would actually take a ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court to uphold any fines, penalties, or injunctions here at the state level. This is insane. As all our listeners know, the legal system can take years to fully navigate and find a final court order, and during all that time, these companies can continue doing whatever they were doing without interruption. As we said, there's 100 other terrible things in this law. It was 47 pages of pure corruption handed to the fracking industry. Governor DeWine is almost done being governor. He can't run again because of term limits. Historically, he has actually tried to make improving Ohio's parks and wildlife one of the biggest parts of his legacy, and he has had some successes, like increasing the number of wetlands, which has led to increases in bird populations for trumpeter swans and bald eagles. But SB 219 threatens all the good that he's done. This law allows oil and gas companies to turn our precious state parks into industrial extraction zones, and explicitly allows them to continue lawfully for years. Back in September, Ohio won the 2025 National Gold Medal Award for Excellence in Park and Recreation Management from the National Recreation and Park Association. We literally have the best state park system in the country. But not for long. Fracking pads damage the environment in many, many ways. The artificial lights kill insects and disrupt nesting and other activities of wildlife. The fracking fluids, which often leak, destroy groundwater reserves. Therefore, that poisons streams and springs. The flaring of excess gases is both noisy and creates a constant rain of toxic hydrocarbons in the surrounding area. It is literally the last thing you would want to do to a beautiful natural area. Our interview with Jenny Morgan last week was all about how oil and gas wells are constantly leaking, spilling, and exploding. On average, accidents happen about once every day and a half. You can be sure that since frackers in our state parks won't face any kind of penalties or fines, no matter what they do in the parks, those accidents and explosions will happen a lot more often. It seems to us that Governor DeWine has wiped out his attempts at a positive legacy with the stroke of a pen when he signed State Bill 219. For our next story, we go to New York. The website environmentamerica.org had a story on June 16th titled Plug-in Solar Legislation Clears New York Legislature. Plug-in solar systems are literally just that. Typically, you'll have one, maybe two solar panels that you literally plug directly into your electrical outlets, just like an appliance. Plug-in panels have become popular in Europe. They give people who live in apartments a chance to get some benefit from solar power. That's also why these units are sometimes called balcony power. The new law in New York State says that utility companies cannot restrict people from using plug-in solar or charge them any fees. Consumers won't be able to install these solar panels just yet, though. First, the panels have to be approved by independent testing labs to ensure that they actually stop producing power if the grid goes out. This is important because uncontrolled electricity production might mean electrical line workers get shocked if they're trying to restore power after a storm or some other outage. Plug-in solar systems range in size from about 200 watts to up to about 1200. 200 watts is not enough power to run a toaster, but 1200 watts could power a small, energy-efficient air conditioner. Balcony solar systems typically offset only 10 to 20% of the electricity needs of the households where they're being used. This is one reason that utilities aren't fighting balcony solar systems, and even in states like Ohio, which is typically hostile to solar power, bills allowing plug-in solar units are passing with bipartisan support. Utah actually passed the first balcony solar legislation. It passed the Republican-controlled legislature unanimously, and 24 states are considering similar legislation, including Ohio, where Representative Tristan Rader introduced legislation that mirrors Utah's back in March. Every little bit helps. If tens of thousands of households install plug-in systems, that can add up to a significant amount of power generation. And as we discussed earlier in the show, solar panels can help even more than expected during the peak hours of demand. So when it gets hot and muggy, like it is right now, people often think of heading for the beach. Our next story is from Scientific American. On July 1st, they ran a story titled "Global Ocean Temperatures Are Entering Uncharted Territory," climate scientists say. The European Union has been tracking global ocean temperatures. They have two systems. One is the Copernicus Climate Change Service, and the other is the Copernicus Marine Service. They use a combination of satellite and ocean-based monitoring. Using this data, which measures temperatures all over the ocean, they came up with a global average ocean temperature of 70 degrees Fahrenheit on June 21st. That might sound balmy and nice to swim in, but it's a new world record for that date. It breaks the previous record, which was in 2024, and the 2024 temperature broke the record before that, set in 2023. This report comes as the planet has entered a new El Nino event. This El Nino is expected to continue well into 2027 and will raise global ocean temperatures even further. The director of the Copernicus Climate Change Service, Carlo Bontempo, says this could be the beginning of a new phase leading to uncharted territory. For our final story, we go to Washington, D.C., where the Supreme Court sided with the giant chemical company Monsanto. The decision was 7-2, and the name of the case was Monsanto versus Darnell. Not surprisingly for this court, it weakens protections against toxic chemical exposures for average citizens. The basis of the lawsuit was that Darnell, who developed cancer after using Roundup, an herbicide based on glyphosate, should have been warned about the potential cancer risks in the labeling on the Roundup container. Darnell sued Monsanto in state court and produced evidence that showed that Monsanto knew their product could cause cancer, but did not warn the public. He won in state court, and there are thousands of similar state lawsuits filed around the country. However, the Supreme Court in this case says that because the federal EPA has not required warning labels, Monsanto can't be held liable in a state court, even though it knew it was producing a product that can cause cancer. Just because the federal government didn't require them to warn people, they have to. This is a terrible precedent. The current EPA is already notorious for ignoring data that proves chemicals harm the public. In this case, the EPA still hasn't said Roundup can cause cancer, even though Monsanto's own studies show that it does. The Supreme Court is basically saying that people can't use state laws or state courts to try to get relief. Well, that's it for our show. We're sorry there wasn't more good environmental news this week, but this is a good time for you to make your own good news. For example, a friend of the show just informed us that she bought a Nissan Leaf, an all-electric vehicle. She was amazed at the price, the comfort, the handling, the acceleration. She's also very happy with the range and the fact that filling up with electricity only costs a fraction of filling a gas tank. And no, we're not being sponsored by Nissan, although we would take that. She has taken a step towards the green future. As we've said many times, the green future is better than our fossil fuel dependent present. Every day, people are discovering the truth of this as they install solar panels and switch to EVs. As we said earlier, the change is happening. It's just not happening fast enough to save us yet. There's still gaps between our fingers on the microphone, but you can help close those gaps. Let us know about your personal efforts to change the world, or about comments about the show, or about anything else. You can send us a text at 419-973-5841, an email at joe@joedemare for agreenfuture.org, or you can find us on social media. Well, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week. This is Joe DeMare signing off.
I don't want no oil spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done.